那个翻译老师帮我讲一下话，我测试一下，谢谢。OK， 可以了，谢谢。
哦，他第一个讲什么？
对，他是第一个。
好吧，很少。
我觉得他们这个海报做的很漂亮。
是120
啊？
120。
我看着就很漂亮，而且我想用彩色，就好漂亮。它不要细描，但是它就有意象，可是又有很多 image 很清楚嘛。 我就想说，今年如果做。
亚洲产业文化资产平台，也就是我们说的 ANI， 是一个亚太地区的跨国产业文化资产平台。这个平台呢，是以多边的交流、还有资讯共享、还有跨域协作作为精神跟目标。我们希望来推动文化资产区域性和主题性的国际交流合作。长期以来呢，ANI 我们盘点了亚洲产业文化资产的经典案例，还有名录。也梳理了亚洲产业文化资产的体系还有脉络，而这些学术资讯都可以在 ANI 网站上看到。此外，还有这个半年期的这个期刊，提供专业的知识分享。每年度的这些论坛，我们也邀集了专家学者还有青年人齐聚一堂，大家共同来进行传承还有交流的活动，以及各式各样的讲座推广的这些活动也都在这里发生。平时大家也可以关注 ANI 的一些 Facebook， 还有 IG， 还有 Twitter， 我们可以了解到全球产业文化资产的最新趋势还有讯息。大家都了解到，现在是一个数位的时代，每一个人呢都可以透过知识型的这个影片来做线上还有线下的自我学习。也因此呢 ，ANI 的线上学习专区，我们希望用各种的影片，以有趣而且容易了解的方式开出亚洲各国不同文化资产领域的这些佼佼者，还有研究学者，他们多年的经验和成果，借由这些无远弗届的网络，把这些知识传播给更多的人，让大家更容易参与，而且乐于学习，让文化资产走进更多人的这个日常生活。我觉得这是一件非常美好的事情。
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome all the audience from all over the world. Today we have a great opportunity to talking about people and nature with the heritage and sustainable tourism. Today we have three speakers talking about OECM, Geopark, and the Geopark application, which is including geo, how to embed it in the geoeducation and geodiversity. And our speaker from IUCN, which is the IUCN WCPA Regional Vice Chair, Arang Zahan, and also Professor from National Taiwan Donghua University, Guangzhong Li, and also project leader in Philippines, which is UNESCO IGCP project talking about heritage and for resilience. And we have a discussion from National Taiwan Normal University Department of Geography Su Juan Su. She will be today's discussion. And I'm Wencheng Wang from National Taiwan Normal University as well. And that's a very great topic, talking about geoheritage and sustainable tourism. And I think we had to thank the ASEAN network of industrial heritage for the invitation, particularly thanks for the Bureau of Cultural Heritage, which belongs to Ministry of Culture. I think today's topic is very important, particularly the network. I think the network in the very lately initiative in the UNESCO, which is called Global Geopark Network. That network is a territory hosting geological treasures of our planet, and a network of communities, a network of people, a network of solidarity, collaboration, and exchange. And UNESCO Global Geopark Initiative Network has been 20 years. They are celebrate their 20 years 20 years ago in Paris. There are 25 regions become the first list of geopark. They aims to protect and prosperity, manage the geological heritage worldwide, when promote sustainable development, including sustainable tourism in region that host outstanding geological sites. And over these 20 years, through the effort by the network and the local communities, I think a significant progress has been made in those areas, including protection, conservation, and the management of our outstanding geological site, and development of infrastructure and the geotourism service, and the implementation of environment education, and also local development by provide new jobs and creating opportunity for young people in these remote areas. And these efforts foster a sense of rural pride in these rural regions. And these are all our today's three speakers talk. And I think the network is very important. This now, 20 years later, that will be the UNESCO Fast Growth Initiative. Now we have 213 UNESCO Global Geopark in 48 countries. And I think Taiwan also, in the same time, we have launched the Geopark guidance program in 2004. Exactly the same time, 20 years ago. And until 2011, we have a Taipei Declaration on landscape conservation, start up from to establish the Taiwan Geopark Network. So we have Geopark Network as well. And Taiwan Geopark Network now have, since Taipei Declaration, we have 13 years now. And officially, we have 10 designated local geopark in Taiwan, including Mazhu, Caolin, Caota, 澎湖、利吉、富冈、野柳，还有台南的龙崎、内埔二地地质公园，还有高雄的西南二地地质公园 and 和平岛 Geopark. And I think very important that this initiative has been institutionalized globally and locally. In the UNESCO system, 2015, UNESCO start to incorporate the formal institution in UNESCO to make the global geopark as an initiative alongside the, we all know, biosphere reserve and the World Heritage Site. Now we have geopark, which is called UNESCO Global Geopark. The following year, which is 2016, we have the law. Our president announced the inclusion of geopark in the cultural heritage preservation act. That is a very important mileage for Taiwan to institutionalize this establishment of geopark. So that's a part of Ministry of Culture as well. So that's the reason we are here to discuss, talking about people and nature, geoheritage, and sustainability. And that is very meaningful in this, the terrain of culture. So we have 10 geopark and some of aspiring. And that's so far geoheritage and the people, nature, people and nature to development. And today we have these three speakers. So first, I would like to invite Aran Hanzad to talking about OECM, which is all other effective protection measure to in the East Asia region. I think we invite Aaron, and the floor is yours, Aaron, please. Yeah, because Aaron still not yet come in, so we first invite Professor Guangzhong Li, Professor Li, to talking about from cultural landscape to geopark. Guangzhong 老师, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Wang. Let me share my slides. Is the slide working?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to meet you online. I'm going to use a case study in Taiwan to illustrate the topic about from cultural landscape to geopark and ecosystem services approach to rural landscape tourism. First, about some key concepts for the research. And these are the key international instruments for participatory and landscape approaches. for the study, including IUCN Protected Landscape Seascape, UNESCO World Heritage Cultural Landscape, UNESCO Global Geopark, and maybe more important one, the CBD Satoyama initiative. Let me explain a little bit about the international partnership for the Satoyama initiative. IPSI was launched during CBD COP10, 2010 in Nagoya, Japan. And the goal is about both biodiversity and the livelihoods. And the key conceptual framework for the Satoyama initiative was learned from Japan's Satoyama Satoumi assessment, which was based on Millennium Ecosystem Assessment and focusing on the interaction between rural area ecosystem services and the rural community livelihoods. And among the indirect and direct drivers, the underuse is the very special one and regarded as a threat to the interaction. Therefore, the goal for the Satoyama initiative is about revitalization of the social ecological production landscape and seascape sepals. And this is the triple approach to the Satoyama initiative. And this framework is quite useful and applied to many places in Taiwan to help local community to work on ecosystem health, sustainable resources use, traditions and innovation, multi-stakeholder governance, and sustainable livelihoods. Let's move to the case study. The case study locates in the east part of Taiwan in the coastal mountain range. And you can see the yellow boundary is the Turtle River watershed, and also the boundary of the Fengnan village, and the boundary of the indigenous Amis Chilamidai tribe, and the boundary for the Turtle River Aspiring Geopark. And the main livelihoods for the local people is rice planting. Rice planting covers about 92 hectares, including about 80% organic and environmentally friendly farming. And this is the strategic framework for the research team to work with local people for community-based landscape conservation and tourism, and then mainly focus on conserving and utilizing landscape resources to help local people to know through understanding of their local ecosystem services, and to cherish through appreciation of the nature benefits, and to show through interpretation of their tourism and green products. And the community-based landscape tourism is the key kind of umbrella concept for the research, but can be categorized into different terms for the purpose of working with local people in different situations, including cultural, rural tourism, more about social, cultural, economic diversity, ecotourism, about biodiversity, and geotourism, about geodiversity. And there are 3 phases of the 18-year-long qualitative action research, including phase 1, about awareness enhancement of Fengnan aspiring cultural landscape. Phase 2, about the designation and management of Chihala'ai cultural landscape. And phase 3, designation of the planning for the Turtle River Aspiring Geopark. Let's move to the phase 1. In order to enhance cultural landscape awareness, the research team, the university, help local community work with local school to set up a partnership platform and working on investigation of the landscape resources and the planning of community-based tourism and the place-based education activities. And these activities were supported by relevant projects from the local and regional authority. And this is the partnership platform in schools where the school teacher and their students and local people can meet together outdoor to explore their resources and share the finding indoor in the school. And together they create this community landscape resources map with different sites of cultural, economic, scenic, and wildlife resources in and around the village. And based on this resources investigation, local community and local school planned together and conducted for the first time a one-day outdoor environmental education activities for their kids and the university students and guided by local people and local school. Phase 2, the amendment of the Cultural Heritage Preservation Law in 2005 added a new item about cultural landscape, which provide new opportunity for a research team to work with local people on planning, designation, and management of a indigenous rice paddy cultural landscape in Chihala'ai settlement, and followed by a weekend community-based environmental education program for the local indigenous youth. The Chihala'ai cultural landscapes part of the Fongnan village covers the watershed, about 1,000 hectares, including 20 more households. And after 1 year efforts, local residents decided to propose the Geoheritage cultural landscape designation plan by themselves and successfully set up in May 2012. You can see the boundary, it's a whole watershed. In the downstream area, there are many rice paddies, irrigation channels, and their settlement. And these are very closely to their livelihoods. And this is also a new type of living cultural landscape designated by law and in the light of the international concepts such as IUCN Protected Area 5 and Satoyama Initiative. And after the designation, local people value more about the cultural landscape and started to work on eco-farming rice, eco-green tourism, and local youth environmental education program. And they also create a new brand of rice, the hada rice. Hada is an endangered fish in the upstream area, identified by their ancestor. So we can see on the rice bag, the information, the logo of the Geoheritage cultural landscape, and the information about the Satoyama Initiative, Chixing, green level, and the pure water. And local people also found the importance of the traditional knowledge transfer. So soon after the designation, they conducted 2 summer camps to teach their kids about the wisdom of the elder and their history and tradition. And after some discussions with the research team, local people decided to extend the summer camp to a kind of weekend community-based environmental education courses. So these discussion include the purpose, the time, the boundary, and who will be the teacher and students and how. And also the courses theme mainly include agriculture and livelihoods, culture and community, nature conservation, and so on. And this diagram shows the roles and interaction among different stakeholders, and the research team from the university help local teachers in C to recruit and teach their young kids, and got support from their parents and residents, and also the graduate. And all these activities were supported by a relevant project from the local and regional authority. Let's move to the phase 3 about the Turtle River Aspiring Geopark. Geoheritage cultural landscape is only part of the Fongnan village, and it was a little bit difficult to expand to larger area due to some land use restriction perceived by local people. However, another amendment of the Cultural Heritage Preservation Law in 2016, as mentioned by Professor Wang in early time, added a new item about the geopark, and providing a very good opportunity for the research team to work with more people and in the whole village. But there's a question about how to promote local green economies, such as eco-geotourism and the environmental interpretation through cooperative planning for the geopark. So in order to deal with these issues, the research team conducted a series of 5 local workshops, indoor and outdoor, on inventory of community issues and resources, which relating to ecosystem services among sites of 5 selected key eco and geotourism zones. And the ecosystem services framework, based on the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, provide a very good, useful inventory list for the research team to work with local people about potential eco and geotourism sites. And this is the table for local people to discuss and click in the workshop. You can see local people click the relationship between the items of the provisioning, regulating, and cultural services, and the different tourism sites in the different zones, and also share their understanding and opinions with each other. And based on this information, this is the outcome of the provisioning services. The number in the bracket is the county of the qualitative data coding from the workshop discussion. So you can see local people identify more on freshwater, food and fiber, and the ornamental resources. And for the regulating services, local people identify more on water regulation, air quality maintenance, climate regulation, and erosion control. And for the cultural services, local people identify many more, including cultural diversity, knowledge system, social relations, cultural heritage value, spiritual and religious value, education value, aesthetic value, sense of place, recreation, and ecotourism. And in terms of the 3 services, local people identify many more on cultural services and the provisioning services. So based on the information from the workshop, the research team conducted a series of 4 outdoor workshops, 2 for eco-geotourism through planning, and another 2 for tool interpretation exercise guided by local people, so that in the future local people can gradually conduct these tourism activities by themselves. And there are some follow-up. The first one, multi-stakeholder platform meeting for eco geotourism development and geopark planning, set up in 2010, comprised of 10 now more local organizations. It is chaired by local leaders, facilitated with the university and the local regional authority, and quarterly meeting. And also research team help local organization to get involved in the Taiwan Geopark Network annual exchange activities so that they can learn from other geoparks and share their experiences. And the publications, mainly a landscape tourism guidebook written by local organizations for the general audience. And as we mentioned in the upstream area, they have the Hala rice. And for the downstream area, there are many rice paddies. So they created a new brand, Turtle River Rice, working with the Ninth Water Agency agent. And also they have been working on so-called full return ecological engineering to save water, to return storm, fish, and the land to the river. And the very recent news, good news, last month was about they participate Taiwan Geopark to Design competition and won the gold medal. Conclusion. In terms of the community-based ecosystem services workshop, participants agreed that ecosystem services approach provided a comprehensive framework for identifying, valuing landscape resources and development issues. And the local people had more knowledge about culture and provisioning services than of the regulating one. Maybe because for local people, provisioning and cultural services are in general more tangible, comprehensible, and easier to explain. And for the whole process, the 3 phases, we found the landscape conservation should be viewed as a holistic part of the integrated landscape management in the context of the connectivity between geodiversity and the other nature cultural components of a living landscape, and also a time, space, and stakeholder sensitive introduction of a relevant landscape concept, ensure trust and reciprocity in the long-term multi-stakeholder partnership. And this diagram shows the institutional arrangement between primary and the secondary stakeholder. And the relationship have evolved over time and also benefited from facilitating efforts of the bridging stakeholder. In this case, the university. Capacity building activities and bridging of the local knowledge and expert knowledge plays a central role in empowering Fengnan locals as the host and interpreters of their native landscape. More information can be found in this paper. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Professor Lee, to bring us a very practical community experience from the cultural landscape to geopark. And following, I am going to invite Arang Hanzat. He is from IUCN WCPA, Regional Vice Chair of Southeast Asia. And he's going to talking about OECM. This is a very lately IUCN initiative, which is other effective area-based conservation measures. And we invite Hanzat to share our East Asia experience. And Awan, this is your time.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having
Go
me.
ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And can I please have someone project my presentation, please? My slides. Is there anyone, please, can show my slides?
Yes. Yeah, hold on.
Oh, it's been done. Sorry. Okay. This is the title of my presentation, the Asian Philosophy of Protected Areas. And I'm going to argue that this is probably the genesis of OECMs. And I'm going to argue this in 24 slides. Next, please. So I'm going to summarize the work that I did many years ago. In 2009, I was given a grant to research the Asian philosophy of protected areas that I presented at the first Asia Parks Congress in Sendai, Japan in 2013. So from there, I'm trying to connect it to what is now becoming very popular and also accepted by the Convention on Biodiversity, CBD, which is OECMs. So I'm going to talk about the past, the present, and then what could be the future. Next, please. So in the past, if you talk about the Asian philosophy of protected areas, the key phrase that is always used is harmony between humans and nature. So the Asian philosophy, whether it is East Asian, South Asian, or even Southeast Asian, this is common harmony. And next, please. So when we did the research, a 1-year research, it's just a desk study. We started small, and then I found out that there's a lot of commonalities. So we then, with another 2 authors, prepared this Asian philosophy that was presented, as I said earlier, in Sendai. And you can see that as a summary. Asia's philosophy, for example, in China, the Tao, 4,000-year-old tenet, humans in harmony with nature, resonates very well across Asia. And then natural areas in Asia are not really pristine, but they are really the manifestation of cultural values and practices. Next, please. Next, okay. So, for example, this is a very interesting example of Zhang Yaiji, China's first natural World Heritage Site. And if you look at from the Western perspective, this could be a fringe, infringing on the outstanding universal value when they built the pagoda, but instead, from the Eastern or Asian perspective, the pagoda is not compromising the naturalness of the property. Is not meant to be a symbol of man's domination over nature, but it is a term, I think it's Mandarin. Of course, I don't read or speak Mandarin. So it is called the essence or techi that, again, exemplifies nature's humans' oneness with nature. Next. In Taiwan, I think any of you should be familiar with this, the mental map of the indigenous community showing a village which is surrounded by river and the mountain. These are all sacred natural sites. And if you look at the relevance of sacred natural sites in Asia, they could be in the form of, in India, they are called sacred groves around the temples. In China, Hong Kong, possibly Taiwan, feng shui forests. There are around 6,000 feng shui forests still in China alone. Chinjuri no Mori, and they are all very close to the Japanese philosophy. So if you look at the commonalities between these are that they are all created by beliefs, taboos, prohibitions, and reverence for physical elements, mountains, forests, rivers, and they don't have any legal protection. But again, because of it is being revered by the local community, so who believe that bad things would happen if sacred natural sites are encroached upon. So they have been protected for centuries now. Next, please. So we also did a comparison between these sacred natural sites and the what is called formerly protected areas. And you can see this is an example in India, where, for example, in the Jainta Hills, the sacred grove, and in terms of the trees, in terms of species, they have above average vascular plants diversity. And also in the Western Ghats, you can see that they allow their collection of the trees that are permitted for livelihoods, and yet they contain more diversity than officially declared protected areas. So next slide. If you care to look at the Asian philosophy, you can download it from the IUCN site. This is just a snapshot where in China, in Yunnan, so there's very high levels of species diversity in areas that are revered by the Yi people, especially in terms of medicinal orchards. Indonesia, in West Timor, where they have sacred groves, contributing to more plants diversity too, and also Thailand. So the Asian philosophy resonates well with all the countries in Asia in terms of reverence, in terms of protecting this, even though the government does not declare them as legally protected areas. Next, please. If you were to compare what is called the colonial model of protected areas, this is starting from Yellowstone, when it was declared, the first national park declared in 1872. You must remember that this Yellowstone was once lived by the native Indians, and they were moved out of their area. And when it was declared as a national park for conservation, for recreation, so it became the model for the development of, not development, for establishment of national parks all over the world. And yet, this is a kind of colonial model because it has resulted in many problems in our part of the world. It has resulted in displacement of the native indigenous population. That resulted also in non-compliance, so a lot of encroachment, and until now, contestations. So this is the result of the philosophy that is alien to Asians and also indigenous communities in Latin America and Africa. Next, please. So that's the past, and when we try to bring it to the present, the main question that we ask ourselves during our research on the Asian philosophy, what are the threats to such areas that were protected because of reverence, and not by any form of legal protection? Next, please. So there were many factors. Next. But over the years, you can see that there has been a kind of a convergence between protected areas, the formal ones, and the conserved areas. And if you can see on the left, the blue box, so protected areas, although they began as colonial models, communities were displaced, and incrementally the locals became included again, and this because of the introduction of collaborative management models such as ICCAs, and also some kind of rediscovery of the spiritual values. On the right, which is the one in orange, these are the traditionally conserved areas that were conserved through taboos, myths, prohibitions, and of course, central to the philosophy of harmony between humans and nature. But if you look at in the middle, there seems to be a convergence now, especially through what is called adaptive management. And when the term OECMs were introduced, it fits very well with the conserved areas complementing the formerly protected areas. Next, please. So the threats to the Asian philosophy, especially conserved areas, are there. Increasingly, there is a decreasing spiritual attachments to traditional beliefs and taboos. They are considered as being very backwards. And then the internet, has spread this global community with diminishing appreciation of traditional values. And then the mainstream religions, be it Islam, Christianity, or Hinduism, they are changing their interpretation, and anything that is considered as the ancient wisdom or are considered as being outdated, and this has erased some of our Asia's wisdom in human environment relationships. And added to that is the influx of domestic tourists. They are posting a lot of pressure on the conserved areas. Next, please. I just want to use 3 case studies, just a summary of those, to exemplify what I've been saying. So the first one is Kinabalu Park in Sabah, Malaysia, which is Malaysia's first World Heritage Site, Natural World Heritage Site, inscribed in the year 2000. And besides being a formal protected area, the mountain is also considered as a sacred mountain by the local community, not only surrounding the mountain, but also as far as other districts where they believe that the mountain is the perpetual resting place for the spirits of their ancestors. When they die, they don't go to heaven or hell; they just remain there. But if I look at the dossier, nomination dossier, and surprisingly, the dossier described the local communities as a threat to the biodiversity of the area. You can see that this is the attitude or the common belief at the time that locals will not respect conservation. But if you look before the mountain was declared as a national park, the locals were very much conserving their natural environment because of their reverence for the mountain. Next, please. But in the year 2015, there was an earthquake. It's a very rare earthquake. Malaysia is very free from natural disasters. And around 10 people were killed, mainly children. So what happened was that many of the locals believed that the Mount Kinabalu, the gods were angry because there were a group of tourists, Western tourists, who went up there to the peak and then took off their clothes. And there was a trend where people, Western tourists, a small group, of going to sacred areas like Borobudur, Angkor Wat, and doing the same. So however, the respect for local values and beliefs are not included in the management strategies. There were no do's and don'ts. And even though the sacred mountains were revered by the locals, to the Western tourists, it's just a mountain. They want to go there, they want to climb, they want to conquer, and they were let off. They spent maybe one night in the police lockup, but there was no law that could keep them, But worse than that, next please. They were lives were lost and property was damaged, and the mountain had to be closed for many months. And the local guides has to risk their lives, and even 1 or 2 local guides died trying to save the students. But they were doing this, of course, because of humanitarian reasons. But also, when we would talk to them afterwards, they were saying that we wanted to ensure, the sacredness of the mountain. So that was the intrinsic reason why they risked their lives to save all these stranded children. Next, please. But of course, the UK tabloids then had a field day revealing, the supposed to be backwardness of the local reverends, and saying that look at the headlines, Star, the Sun, and Mirror, because the customary native laws were not incorporated into the governance system. So the spiritual value of Kinabalu Park was only recognized in 2010, even though they have been gazetted as a national park for almost 50 years. So the Sabah National Park, then, because the director, asked one local lady, why do you hate us so much, hate the custodians? Because you have not allowed us to go up the mountain to pay our respect to the, mountain gods. So the director said, okay, next year we will allow you once a year, what is called a community day. They can go up, they can pay their respect, they can perform rituals, and all was forgiven, because this is a way of, reconnecting the locals with their spiritual areas. Next. Number 2 is Bali, Subak, the Bali rice terraces. They are not just rice terraces, they are a very unique temple water system based on democracy. But when tourism, especially investors from outside, married local people, and they bought over land and they turn it into tourism villas. So they really changed, the democratic decision-making process and adaptive management, and that has also been very crucial towards the conservation of such areas for biodiversity conservation. Next. And finally is the marine park, where Malaysia in Sabah declared probably one of the largest marine protected areas in the world. Almost 1 million hectares were gazetted. This is testimony to the Sabah government's commitments to especially Aichi Target 11 for MPAs. But next slide, please. There was a problem, because within this huge MPA, there were about, until now, even 80,000 inhabitants, and these are the nomadic sea gypsies. They're very poor, and some have been displaced, they've been chased out. So in terms of trying to get a proper right approach with the rights-based approach, especially in trying to have more preserving the rights of the local nomadic gypsies, this is still a huge challenge, despite this area being declared gazetted as one of the largest MPAs in the world. Next, please. So let me just end by focusing on hope, the future. I think there's a lot of hope for the future. Next, please. So in terms of the Aichi targets that has passed in terms of the planning horizon 2020, the world wanted to achieve 17% terrestrial MP and 10% PAs, marine PAs, so target 11. There have been a lot of community approaches or protocols, and one of them is the Community Conserve Area, CCA. So CCAs are, from my perspective, they and other forms of sacred nature sites, they contain a lot of the elements of OECMs, and I've been involved in OECMs since I was in IUCN as a counselor until now. Malaysia now, next week we're having our national workshop on the developing a national framework for OECMs. But I am fully aware of the challenges in developing OECMs, especially from the legal aspects. And I'm very surprised to see everywhere I went, in conferences, too much focus has been put. How do we legalize this? How do we manage this in a legal manner? Even 2 months ago in Tokyo, there was an Asian workshop on OECMs, and still there were too much discussion or too much focus on the legal, because I believe legal should be there because for the sake of governance. But at the same time, if you look at spiritual sacred nature sites, do not have a legal structure, and yet they could be, conserved for a long time. And OECMs, I think, have gone towards too much of trying to put it as if it is a protected area, and it is not. So they should not have the same kind of governance. And I believe that if Asia were to revisit our Asian philosophy, and then we can provide the best model for OECMs for the world to replicate. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for Professor Henzat. He's interested in Asian philosophy with nature. I think that's a very nice elaboration with case studies, with empirical studies for the future, I think. And now let's move to Naomi Irapta. She is going to bring us about about geology, geoheritage, geoeducation, and geodiversity, and even geotourism. And now, Naomi, floor is yours.
It sound clear?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, great. Let me just start.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so it's great to meet you this afternoon. So good morning to those in my time zone, and afternoon to those in Asia right now. What I'm going to present today is more of case examples of geoeducation. And it's related and tied to the previous two talks. In terms of, we're all talking about protecting nature, but also balancing it with our cultural heritage. And so what I'm going to present today is geoconservation with consideration for cultural heritage and historical monuments and other kinds of heritage. But before that, sorry, I'm using the wrong mouse. Before that, why do we do conservation? And when we think about heritage, any kind of heritage, whether it's natural, cultural, built, industrial, these are all valuation systems. So heritage is basically a valuation system. We protect what we see as valuable. And when it comes to geoheritage, this is a scientific value. So by definition of geoheritage, this is a part of the geodiversity, or what we consider as non-living nature, that is scientifically valuable. Some would argue this is a geologic value of nature. And so geosites are these areas where we consider what we consider as geologically valuable sites. Now, pulling back to the concept of conservation, how do we conserve geoheritage, and how do we motivate people outside of the geosciences to conserve these geosites? A big key to this is the recognition of that geologic value. And so here is where geoeducation comes in. When we talk about the geologic value of an area, we are spreading and increasing the geo-knowledge of people outside the geosciences so that they're able to recognize the geo-value of these geosites. Now, as Prof. Amran also mentioned earlier, some naturally valuable sites, whether it's biosphere reserves or geosites, are also popular areas. For example, the Yellowstone is a good example. So this is a great opportunity for us geoscientists to popularize the concept of geoheritage and geodiversity. So where do we start engaging people outside of the geosciences to care about the geologic value of nature? So we can think of this as the intersection of geosites and popular areas, or the other way around, there are popular areas with geologic value, and we can start geoeducation there. So what I'm going to show you in the next few slides are examples of place-based geoeducation efforts. When we say place-based, you go to a place and learn about that place that you're in. And for this examples, we learn about the geo aspect of these places. So the first two I'm going to share are actually things that we already did in the Philippines. And these are in natural heritage sites or natural sites. And the last one is the potential of doing geoeducation in cultural heritage sites as well. So the first one I want to share is a geoeducation field trip that was done in 2023 in the Palawan Island. So Palawan is one of the bigger islands in the Philippines, and this geoeducational field trip was organized by the University of the Philippines Geology Alumni Association. It is a 2-day field trip where they visited, oh, you can't see my arrow, these areas. And one of these areas is actually a heritage site. So Palawan Island is a biosphere reserve, so it's biologically valuable, but it's also a World Heritage Site, specifically the underground river. So this field trip, this 2-day field trip, visited a diversity of tourist or popular sites like heritage sites, cultural sites like the Vietville, mining areas, and geological sites like a landslide sites as well. So this kind of geoeducation effort was open to the public, but you had to pay to join, around 40 to 70 US dollars. There's a 2-day itinerary, and you had the option to join for 1 day or for both days. And this is more of a structured geology interpretation for the public. So how this worked was that participants were transported. They get to visit different sites, and while they're in that sites, a team of experts interpreted these sites in a geologic way. So this focused on, so these are the pictures from the field trip, and you can see them here using a geologic lens, and then you have also whiteboards to interpret and to show the structures of the area. So this focus on what is the geology of the area that we are in. And it's really, the main goal for this was to reinterpret these popular sites in the Palawan Island in the geologic sense. So aside from being tourist spots, aside from being a biosphere reserve, aside from being just famous spots for tourists and locals, what is the geologic importance of these areas? And so they gave these handouts like these to the participants as well. So this included the geologic information of the area. So this is the geoeducational field trip. It's more of a structured field trip that's focused on sharing the geology of the area. The next example I wanted to talk about is one that I am directly involved in, is the Tinipak River. It's part of an art project. So the Nomad Project is an art group, collective of art projects run by Vian Valencia. And in last year, I was given the opportunity to do a geoeducation talk under this art project. And so just to introduce the site, it's not as internationally famous as Palawan, but it is locally a tourism and recreation area. And the Tinipak River area, so this is the Tinipak River area, and very nice. These are owned by the Dumagat Remontado Indigenous Group. These are legally their ancestral lands and waters. And so what we did here was what we call Open Edu Landscapes as Classrooms that we did in May 2023. It's a mix of art project and science education. And these are the pictures from this workshop. So this is a place and issue relevant geoscience topics. So in this kinds of workshop, it's less structured compared to the Palawan Geo Tour. This is me and the participants, locals, collaborating artists, talking about the river while we're in the river itself. So this is one of the gravel bars in the river. These are the limestones around the river. And here we talked about karst, river systems, and issue relevant. So it's not just geology, but also how humans interact with the river. So there is a proposed dam in this area. So we also talked about the effects of damming the river. And also, for the first time, we are introducing the concept of geoheritage outside of institutionalized education, outside of classrooms. I believe this is the first time we're ever introducing this concept to the public in the Philippines. And there's a video here. So that's what we're doing, and that's how we did it. So these are the local participants, and that's the beautiful river that we were in. And so this one is less formal. So we didn't have handouts like they did in Palawan Tutor. We used minimal lecture style tools. And when I was talking, we were pointing at the limestones around us and the rivers around us to talk about geologic processes. And this was not a formal lecture where I'm the only one talking. I have moderated this workshop wherein locals and other participants were allowed to share their knowledge of the river as well. And so this format allowed intersection conversations that is rooted on the landscape. It was more of a potluck discussion where I talked about the river in the geologic sense, the locals talked about the river in the sense of how they view the river, whether through indigenous knowledge or as locals, and the other participants were talking about the river as tourists. So we have different points of views converging together in these conversations. And one important key for this is that it was done in the local language, in Filipino. And the thing to note about the Philippines is when we teach geosciences in classrooms, in formal education, most of the time we do it in English. So our textbooks are in English. And so translating these knowledges in the local language was also very important and essential into doing workshops like these. And the last example I wanted to share is something that we haven't done, but we saw the potential years back. So instead of going to natural areas like underground rivers, the Patinipac River, can we do geoeducation in historical monuments, in built heritage areas? So the example I'm sharing now is coincidentally, we just added this in the World Heritage List, tentative list for 2024, the historic towns of Taal and Taal Volcano and the Caldera Lake. So this was added to the tentative list just early this year, and it was submitted for the criterion of cultural heritage for the historic town of Taal and church ruins in Taal, as well as natural heritage for the Taal Volcano and the Taal Caldera. So the nomination dossier identified, I colored in blue, what is the significance or what is the value that they find in these areas, and in yellow are which areas and what aspect of these areas are valuable. So first is blending of different cultures, architecture and urban planning, adaptability, architecture, building technology, and they identified the valuable sites or the valuable things as the Basilica of St. Martin, historical relocations of the towns, and the churches, which are coincidentally geosites or geologically important sites that we've already identified way back in 2020, where we presented this in the first Oxford Geoheritage Virtual Conference. I talked about the Taal Church ruins, and the Taal Basilica as geoeducation sites. So how does this work? These are not rock outcrops. These are not natural landscapes. These are built landscapes. How do we talk about the geo aspect of these things? Well, here's a story. In 1575, the Taal Church was built near the caldera lake of Taal volcano. And this was made of coralline limestones. And so this reflected, the building stones for this church reflected their environment that is close to the sea and that's near water, because these are coral stones. In 1754, Taal had a very big eruption that buried and destroyed this original church. And as a response to that, the population moved from this old location, you can see here in the map, to a new location farther from the Taal Lake. And also higher, it's a higher ground. So they were reacting to the eruption of the Taal volcano. And they said, we have to move farther from the volcano to avoid future eruptions that are destructive to our community like this. And so in 1755, they have rebuilt their church to St. Martin in this new location. So this is now what we have as one of the Asia's largest Catholic churches. So this is the Basilica of Taal. And this time, they made it with ignimbrite. So this is a kind of volcanic rock that is formed from very explosive eruptions of the volcano. And so this story of the Taal Church ruins and the new Taal Church is not only about the volcanic eruption, but it also tells us, so the building stones, or what we call in heritage, these heritage stones, talked about the geology of the area as well. So now you are farther from the lake. They now have new building materials, which is also sourced in that area, and it is reflective of the volcanic eruptions in the past that created these ignimbrite rocks that they used to build this new church. And so the story of this Taal Basilica and Taal Church ruins is not just talking about Taal is an active volcano and it could be destructive. It's not just that. People in this general region are exposed to wider, more volcanic centers that have the potential to erupt. We have the Taal caldera, which is an active volcano. Banahao volcano is also active, and then other active volcanoes, along with their proximity to two major faults in the Philippines, the West Valley Fault System and the Philippine Fault Infanta segment. So when we're talking about the history of these Taal churches, we're not just talking about a history of a community, but it's also a story of the geologic and seismic history of that area and the potential for future volcanic and seismic hazards in this area. So we can use this opportunity to talk about geo-risk awareness. What is the natural hazard risk in this area? And how do we learn from these events in the past to build resilience to future volcanic eruptions and seismic earthquakes, for example? And so that story, you can actually see it in the Taal Basilica, which is a natural historical monument in the Philippines. So the story I just told you talked about the first Taal church, and then they moved it. And it also added the importance of an earthquake in 1849, partially destroying the church again and people rebuilding it again. And it didn't stop there. The earthquakes and volcanic eruptions didn't stop there. So these two churches, these two sites have experienced multiple cycles of volcanic eruption and earthquakes. And so we can see here that place-based geoeducation is not limited to natural areas. We don't limit ourselves to talking about the geo aspect in natural landscape. We can also talk about them in cultural heritage like this. And it's not just what is the geology of the area. We can talk about how this geology affect the communities, what is the geohazard risk of this area, and how can we use this knowledge to prepare better for future geohazards. And also, it's a great way to highlight the historical resilience of Filipinos. And most of us, we have so many volcanoes. We are co-volcanic societies. And looking back at our history and how we responded to these eruptions in the past, to highlight our resilience and how we can improve more our disaster risk reduction. And lastly, I just want to share that this project, this research was done for my master's, and it's part of the IGCP 692 project that you can visit more of it in geoheritage.com. This is mostly what we do. It's combining working with local communities to capacitate them for geoheritage and geohazard education. And if you go to our website, some interesting things for you might be looking at the possible island residency, which is a science art residency they did in the island of Vulcano in Italy, and Geopedregal in Mexico. So this is a restored biological ecological site, which is also a lava flow, and how you can follow our progress there and how we do geoheritage and geohazard. So if you're interested more in connecting with the people who have organized the case studies and the case examples that I showed you, please feel free to take a screenshot, take a photo of this slide, and you can scan the QR codes or search them on Instagram to get in touch. Or if you don't have the social media, so us Filipinos are very big fans of social media, you can reach out to me and I can forward the message along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naomi. It's very nice talk. I think for
Thanks.
time-wise, I have to move to our discussant. Our panelist
Thank you so much.
is from National Taiwan Normal University, Professor Su Juan Su. Time's yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I need to show my slides. I don't know why it's not showing. Give me a second, sorry. I don't know why it's not showing. Okay. Can you see it? Can you see it? All right. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm very much honored to be invited and to enjoy and listen to the three distinguished talks. And it's like a breeze to me. I particularly like Professor Arnim's talk about environmental philosophy to shy away from hazards. And I also like Naomi's talk about geoheritage for resilience. And also Professor Lee's talk, it's a very, very detailed work. And it's a result of more than 15 years of hard work. And the hard work brought a very beautiful result that we all know. And also it's full of procedural knowledge. So I appreciate the talk very much. And by this title of People and Nature, I take it as a turn to man-land relations, which has been a popular and time-proved concept in geography. And if we are to talk about people and nature, we better not take human beings as the solely whole agency of the earthly world. We need to go about how human beings are coexisting with their environment that nurture them. So with a man-land relational perspective, one would take conservation as means for resilience and for sustainable development. So let's take a look again of the three distinguished papers. What do you think they have in common? And for me, I think it's important that we all talked about place-based versus displacement. And when we talk about place-based, we also talk about contexture. And when we talk about being contexture, we talk about the significance of the local people and how the local people are getting along with their environment. And that means how do they know about their geological characteristics? hazards and risk. And also it's about geoheritage. And if we care about geoheritage, we have to conserve them. And by talking about conservation, we need people. And who are the people best serve as the agents to do the conservation? That's the local people. So if we think about the local people, we think about the local history, we think about the local society and local cultures. What do you think of? I think there are plenty of global initiatives and UNESCO programs that talk about such orientations of conservation. And for me, as a veteran of geopark promoter, I like to bring back the idea of geopark later to show you. So I'm trying to put all this into a point now. Let's take a look at this picture. We see green fields, but we also see cadastral patterns of the field. And if you are a geologist, you know all of a sudden what lies beneath and what kind of ways of life is here been established over history. And let's take another look at this very famous mudstone picture where I am working with. And why would we have such a scene? It's taken 5 years ago, a spring morning. And what is that smog or fog? That's because this is a place very much baked for agriculture. That's why people call it badland. But the people who reside here are very smart historically to build so-called ponds. And the ponds become the life ways for the local agriculture. But how do they prevent the silt of the mudstone from washing into the irrigation system? And this reminds me of the talk that Professor Anand just talked about the subak system in Bali Island. And that's very much a historical and cultural heritage and wisdom as well, owned locally. And that will have to be locally maintained and preserved and conserved by the local people. So if we are talking about all these natural phenomena, we need to talk about how the local people have formed the wisdom to deal with it. So first of all, I like to talk about the environmental philosophies that Professor Anand talked about. Mencius, who is younger than Confucius in Chinese history. When he was talking about good governance to a king, he says in Chinese, 不为农时，谷不可胜食也；硕谷不入屋祠，鱼鳖不可胜食也。普金以食入山林，材木不可胜用也。And in English, it will be translated into, if one follows farming seasons well and reasonably well, there will be enough grains for consumption. And if one does not fish with fine mesh nets in a pond, there will be abundant fish and turtles for all to consume. And if one logs at the right time in the forest, there will be plenty of timbers for use. So these are ancient wisdom that's been talked about and is in Confucius thought as well. And that's very important in Asian philosophy. I think we still have it and we kept it as well. And even if we turn around our eyesight to Latin America, to Bolivia, the president of a very leftist president, Evo Morales, he was the president of Bolivia from 2006 to 2019. He talked about sooner or later, we will have to recognize that the earth has rights too. They have to live without pollution. What mankind must know is that human beings cannot live without Mother Earth, but the planet can live without humans. So I think this would be something that echo the Asian or the so-called Oriental thoughts. And I think that's important to us. Even when we are talking about geoheritage and how do we conserve the heritage, we need to talk about the ways of life and the philosophy of people or the ways of living of people and how do they get along or how do they take care of the environment that nurture them. So I think it's excellent for Professor Anram to talk about how we consider the so-called environmental philosophy as the genesis of OECM, which I agree very much, and I liked it a lot. And thank you so much for bringing that up. And also, I'd like to give you a second perspective that I have been working for more than 15 years. A group of us has been promoting geoparks in Taiwan. And we try to come up with an idea of what is the core value of geoparks. And we kind of categorize it into four. And these are the four perspectives that are linked to each other. And I'm sure what you, the three papers have talked about could be boiled down to all we talked about here. For example, we talked about landscape conservation. What do we conserve? Of course, they are geoheritage to be conserved. And of course, we like to shy away from risks of the Mother Earth, and we like to shy away from the hazards, geohazards as well. So we do landscape conservation. And by doing landscape conservation, we realize that we are doing so-called environmental education to ourselves and to the people that we are talking to. And by familiar with our own environment and being able to give environmental education to visitors or outsiders, we could conduct geotourism or so-called ecotourism. And these are the pre-perspectives, very important. And who is to do that? Should that be done by an enterprise, by outsiders, by people from abroad, by people outside of the community and does know the culture, does not know the culture, does not know the place, does not get along from with the local people? No, these are the people that has to be local. And that's why we promote the so-called geoparks would have to be participated by the local community peoples to make it a successful case. And I don't have time to really guide you through all the details in the four values of the geoparks. But I like to mention a few things. For example, in terms of the local participation, we could dig out the so-called local or traditional wisdoms, either indigenous or non-indigenous. People are the people who know their place the best. And that's why we talked about place-based. It should not be conducted by someone who don't know it, but who only have the so-called modern knowledge. Because there's a lack of affection. There's a lack of care. There is a lack of authenticity. So it has to be done by the local. And so that is why the so-called place-based is such an important aspect, a perspective that we really have to take care. And also, if we talk about the geotourism, ecotourism, we talk about the ways of life of the local people, because that are lives that are being formed through history locally in situ, in the situation that you see in front of you. Could be the flower, could be the plant, could be the geology, could be the landforms. And that is why for the past 4 years in Taiwan, by promoting geoparks, we are trying to, actually this is something echoing Naomi try to talk about so-called landscape sketching or landscape drawing. We try to involve high school students to be in a contest and to try to become, make them aware of their landscape, how they see, how they feel, how they smell, and how they touch, and how they feel when they touch the landscape or the landforms that they care. And these things will become something authenticity to their real life. And that would turn the so-called scientific knowledge into real life. So it's not something only modern knowledge or so-called knowledge they learn to be able to have good grades for examinations. But instead, through those kind of learning, they know the local environment and they know exactly what that kind of geological characteristics will become resilient or not. And as we all know, Taiwan has plenty of earthquakes, like what Philippines has, what Indonesia, Japan have. So we are in the same situation where the continental plate and the oceanic plate colliding. And this is a situation that we are all in. And how do we become aware of that kind of risk or hazards? And try to know our own situation and try to prepare us resilient to be able to face it. And I know I'm short of time, but in terms of the social practice, we try to see it as a so-called participatory planning for geological and ecological and cultural tourism. And in order to do that well, we have to have some sort of resource inventory. So we get to know our own geology, know our own geography, even know our own feng shui. That's what Professor Anam talked about, geomancy, feng shui. That's very important because that's our ancestral wisdom. And also, we try to help each other. We try to provide what we know to the community or to the outsider. So we consider it as a service learning for environment and future generations. So in order to have that to be done, we need to have some sort of mutual trust within the community or between the community and other communities. So that's something very social, economic, and cultural. So I would say, in order to make geoheritage conserved in a better way, we need not only geological geography knowledge, we also need to understand our own society, to understand how society works, and to even categorize or even look into very detail, like what Professor Lee has laid out. We need to know the procedural knowledges. And the procedural knowledge will be full of legal systems and how our legal or so-called national policies will really frame us or help us, and how the so-called social agencies could work from bottom up to make it work, to make it working. And thank you so much. And I appreciate the 3 distinguished talks. And thank you very much. I really gained a lot from you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Su, for her elaboration. I think there's one question for Aaron. Can you explain more about OECM framework? So Aaron? Yeah, Aaron.
Sorry, hello. Can you please repeat?
All right. The floor has a questions about, can you explain more on the OECM framework?
Okay. I think we have to define first what is OECM. So I have to go back to the Aichi target 11. Part of the Convention on Biodiversity agreed that we should aim for 17% protected areas and 10% marine, that was, sorry, terrestrial, and 10% to be achieved by 2020. So we have passed that target, and still we're a bit short. I think globally we have achieved about 15% terrestrial and about 7% marine. So we have to come up with new targets that is under the global biodiversity framework, target 3, it is called, 30 by 30, that we should get allocate 30% of either terrestrial, including inland waters and marine, by the year 2030 to reduce biodiversity loss. And the only way that you can achieve this if we complement protected areas with OECMs. OECM is other area-based conservation measures. OECMs are not meant for conservation, but they do achieve in situ conservation, in effective conservation. So they are not governed by any law, and yet they are contributing to conservation. So if you have sacred natural sites, even an airport, if you have very rich biodiversity, you can apply for your property to be recognized as an OECM. The term here is recognized. It is not gazetted because it's not gazetted by law. It can include even a private land. If you have a tea plantation, for example, tea plantation and where you have crops there, as long as that it contributes to biodiversity conservation, and it also respects local values, spiritual values, cultural values, and then you can apply, nominate your property to be recognized and to be reported as an OECM. It is being led by the Convention on Biodiversity. IUCN has provided the guidance, and Asia now also has come out with the guidance for assessing OECMs at the IUCN regional office in Bangkok. So if you Google, and then you get more information. But it is not only confined to sacred natural sites, community conserved areas. It can also include airports, and that sometimes create problems. In Latin America, the indigenous people do not like community conserved areas and sacred natural sites to be lumped together with airports. I hope I answered that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I think we should give some time for Naomi for the reflection after Professor's discussion. Naomi?
Sorry?
I think you have some reflection to our discussion. Yeah, a few words.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting this sound. I apologize.
Okay, I mean some.
Do I have a question in the chat?
Yes, please.
Which one is
No,
it?
not question. Just a reflection to Professor's discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got lost in the chat.
Okay.
No, I was commenting with Professor Su as well about how I agree with the points that she has made, and also with from Amran's talk. It is very, very important that we take note of this. For example, in the Philippines, it is very important for us since we're just starting our geoheritage efforts, and it's very important that from the get-go we're already thinking about, hey, when we're doing geoeducation, we should not be overpowering or replacing the knowledge that is already there. And echoing with Professor Lee and Professor Su's talk as well, is that a key to this is working with the communities. When we do geoeducation, it shouldn't be from experts with our Western knowledge, which is why Genomic Projects was very close to my heart, because it really showed that when we talked to the local communities, when I asked, why do you think the limestones look like this? And they explained it in local language that me as a scientist, I understand that as it's the same. They see the river carving out these limestones. And that's what I learned in geology as well. And so we can find this intersection where local knowledge is actually jiving with the Western knowledge that I have as a geoscientist. But sometimes they don't overlap. So the examples showed earlier that sometimes the local ways of knowing contradict with some colonial ways of knowing, Western knowledge, and it doesn't have to be one over the other. We have to be open about multiple types of knowledge, and that's what we do in disaster risk reduction as well. So we have to be accepting that there are different points of views about a single area and allow space to hold this different knowledge. No one knowledge over the other. But when it comes to conservation, it's very important to respect local knowledge because it is the locals who will be conserving, putting time and effort to conserve these sites, whether it's natural or any kind of heritage. And so working with them and putting them in the front of conservation, of talking about their landscape is very vital if we want more holistic and more respectful and ethical ways of holistic conservation, not just of nature, but also with the built environment. And that's what I got from all this talks in the webinars. Working with communities is really important, respecting local cultures and different knowledges. So thank you for the opportunity to do a summary like this.
Okay,
I really
thank you.
appreciate it.
And Guangzhou, Professor Guangzhou, will you say something?
Yes. Yes. I think geopark has been a very important instrument to help local people for sustainable future. And for many local people, when they hear about geology, it's kind of professional, hard to understand. We found we can use a landscape concept to discuss with local people that geology also about the interaction between local society and your land. And geology plays as like a stage. And then we have biodiversity, we have our culture, society, livelihoods. And I think two aspects is important when we work with the local people. First, to work with local people to explore their resources, because their life depends on resources. Second, also help local people to know more about the nature hazard as a threat. Yeah, how they can minimize the risk of the nature hazards is also important. So this is what geopark education about. So I think tourism is more about the resources, how we utilize landscape resources to develop tourism. But I think we also need to help local people know more about the nature hazard risks. So in recent year, we actually use resilience as the concept to wisely utilize nature resources at the same time deal with the risk of nature hazards. Yeah, that's what I learned from the concept of geopark. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Guangzhou. I think we have a lot to discuss about the people and nature, but because of time, we have to stop here. I think before we leave, we can take a group of photo. Yeah, and please open your camera, and we take
3, 2, 1. Say cheese.
cheese.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annie, and thank you, Professor Su, Professor Guangzhou, Miss Naomi, and Professor Yuan, and Ra. Thank you very much. Thank you for your today's participation, and hope to see you soon, somewhere, sometime. Yeah, bye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.